There were some really great books in 2019. There were also some pretty horrible ones. Hello everyone, my name is Shelby. Welcome back to my channel, Grace with Books. Today I'm giving you guys the worst books I read in 2019. As you can see, we're sort of in a new location. I am actually back in my room because I am home for winter break. I feel a little weird filming where I used to and not being in my dorm, but you know, it is what it is, and I missed my bookshelf, so I'm happy to have that back. So the next few videos are probably going to be in here, so just look out for that, and then when January rolls around I'll be back in my usual filming location. Today, as I said before, we are looking at the worst books I read in 2019. A lot of people don't think I give bad reviews, and they're right. I tend to read books I know I'm going to like, so therefore I don't give out many negative reviews because I don't know why I would waste my time reading a book that I know I'm not going to enjoy. But there were definitely some books that I read this year that I was really disappointed in and really just honestly hated, and I'm going to be sharing with you guys my ranty thoughts today. So the way that I've structured this video is that we're going to begin with books that I didn't like for more technical reasons and then move into the books that I just simply hated and have a lot to say about. So let's get right into the worst books I read in 2019. So the first book that is on my list is one I'm actually currently reading, but I can already tell is not gonna be in that favorites category. It's not even gonna be in the okay category because I'm really not liking it, but I hate DNFing books. I like to start when I finish something, so I'm trudging on through and I hope it gets better, but as of right now, and I'm a good ways through this book, it is just not good, and that would be A Touch of Gold by Annie Sullivan. So I saw this book on Book Outlet and it had an interesting premise. It is about King Midas's daughter who he turned to gold. And if you know the myth, you know that he rushed his daughter out to the river that flowed by their palace, dipped her in the water, and she was cured of being a golden statue. But when King Midas failed to return the other objects he turned to gold, his daughter was the victim of a new curse, meaning her skin and her hair and her entire body would remain gold. Even though she could still move around and be herself, she would be cursed with this golden hue to her skin, and she's able to sense metallic and gold objects. And when one of these priceless gifts that her father has goes missing, she is sent to go retrieve them because she can actually sense their presence. So I was actually looking forward to this book. I'd never heard of a King Midas retelling before. I thought it'd be really interesting to see another mythology story come to light, but it is not good. It is so fast, and I think this book could have been really well done, but I feel like it's very insta-lovey, which is a trope I'm not really all about. Like, everything seems so obvious, every step they take. Honestly, I can guess the rest of the plot right now, and I just feel like it's moving so fast. We really just don't get a chance to develop any connection to the character or the plot or the setting, and I really don't feel connected to the princess, and I don't feel like I care about the rest of her story. So I was really disappointed with so far in this book, and I'm about over halfway through. Honestly, after the beginning, even if it gets better at the end, I still feel like I have to give it 2 stars because it just had such a rough beginning. So sometimes you can't come back for that. So that's why I'm giving A Touch of Gold, I believe, 2 stars. The next book I'm going to talk about is Lovestruck by Kate Watson. This is a book I actually got through NetGalley, and thought it would be a really cool book to read because, once again, this is actually about Greek mythology. It is about the Cupid myth almost. It is about a Cupid in training who accidentally stabs herself with one of those arrows and makes her fall in love with this punk rocker on Earth, and mayhem ensues. I am a huge fan of Greek mythology, obviously, and I was really excited because I love the Cupid and Psyche myth, so I thought another thing that has to do with Cupids and them accidentally falling in love would be really good, but it was very young. This was marketed as a young adult book, but it felt more middle grade to me, a little bit more younger audience than what I'm used to, and while middle grade is a genre that I sometimes like, I wasn't expecting it with this, and it just made the entire story feel very kiddie and very playtime-esque, and I just didn't enjoy it. On top of being a bit more juvenile than what I was expecting, it was also very slow, and at some point I actually actually think I fell asleep while reading this book because I closed my eyes for like 1 second to blink and then it was like 5 minutes later. So not my finest hour, but also not the finest book I've ever read. So I also gave this one 2 stars. It just wasn't what I was expecting and I was really sad about that. The next book that I picked up that I really did not like this year was The Hive by Barry Lyga, and this was also given to me by NetGalley. The Hive has this very interesting premise. It's basically a dystopian future where social media rules our lives, and if anyone makes like one upsetting or controversial comment, it can cause a mob to descend on you and dole out the punishment that they think is fit. So basically the audience of your tweet or comment decides what punishment is fitting to the nature of the tweet that you send. So basically if you send like a critical tweet about someone, these people can come to you, this mob can descend on you and say that you need to get whipped, and that is an appropriate punishment for the texting crime you've committed. I don't know, I'm not explaining it well, but first of all, it was so unrealistic that while I thought it was a good attempt at a commentary, it just seemed so unlikely that this girl's one controversial comment would be enough to get the Hive or the masses ready to kill her, and that everyone is okay with it, that every bystander, mother, father, child, government official is okay, that this mob has thought that killing this one girl for making one comment is an okay punishment. And I don't know, it just sort of, it took me out of it by how intense it was, and I really didn't like it. I also just didn't connect with the main heroine, like going underground and trying to find the resistance to stop the Hive. And it was just, it felt like it had been done so many times, like a girl running from the government or the masses, finding a resistance, getting together with them and taking down the system. It was just something I've read before. And while it was an interesting format, it just wasn't executed well in my opinion. So I gave this book 2 stars. The next book I'm going to talk about is it's upside down. The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater, and this is the second book in the Raven Cycle series. I loved the Raven Boys. Actually, I had read the Raven Boys once and didn't like it. I reread it and loved it and decided to keep going with the series, but I found myself really not liking the Dream Thieves. First of all, it felt boring in my opinion. I loved having Blue's perspective and all of her adventures in the first book, but this book, I just wasn't interested in Ronan, and I know he's a favorite character amongst a lot, and I'm probably getting tons of like mental hate mail for saying this, but just like I wasn't interested in it. I found myself skimming a lot, which is never a good sign in a book. Also, like one of my favorite characters from the first book, Noah, wasn't barely in this book, so I was like, why am I reading this if Noah's barely going to be in it? Really, I just found myself looking forward to when it was Blue's perspective, and I wish we had gotten more of her. And I understand how this book was more Ronan's story, but Blue was my favorite and I was sort of bored when she wasn't talking, if that makes sense. I do intend to keep reading the series. I am going to go on to Blue Lily Blue and just see if it was just this book that I didn't like. But yeah, I was really upset that I didn't like this book, especially because I felt like I was finally getting on a roll with this series, but this book sort of just brought me down. As I said, I will be trying the next book, Blue Lily Blue, and I'm hoping for better results. Next, we have The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye. I loved the first book in this series, The Crown's Game, but I found The Crown's Fate to be sorely lacking. Lacking in answers, in development of characters, in overall personalities. Like, I felt like everything that was good about the first book was not here at all. First of all, we got no answers. I felt like anything that was posed as a question or maybe something that could have been interesting in the first book, we got no answers about in this book, and you're left wondering about a lot of the biggest plot holes that just never got answered. And that was a big irritation of mine because, you know, when it's a duology especially, and this is the final book in that duology, you want things to be wrapped up, and I felt as though it was not wrapped up. Just like the entire magic system in this book was very confusing, and I honestly felt as though it was made more confusing by this book. So the things I didn't quite understand in the first book, I really didn't understand in this book, and I just honestly think it was a lack of getting questions answered that was why I didn't like this book, because I wasn't able to focus on the characters and their development, which there wasn't a lot of anyway. And I felt like a lot of the things that the characters did in this book, they would have never done in the first book. It's like they had complete personality transplants. So that made me really annoyed because I did enjoy the first book, but was really disappointed with how it ended. And I've heard that Evelyn Skye. Like, everyone likes her new book. I forget what it's called. Circle of Shadows. And I definitely do want to try that book because it looks interesting, and I know I like her writing because the writing wasn't the problem here. I liked how she wrote and told stories. It was just what she was writing about, or more likely not writing about, that really made me irritated with this book. So did not like it. So the next book I'm going to share with you guys, I have ranted about on my channel because I just have such strong feelings about why this book is not a good book or a good experience, especially if you're going into it unaware of what is in the book, and that would be Damsel by Elena K. Arnold. So for me, this was a cover buy. Like, I thought the cover was beautiful, the description looked interesting, it was playing on the whole damsel in distress thing, but it was labeled as young adult, so I was like, you know what, this is a perfect fun royalty read where the girl gets to kick ass. So those were my impressions going into this book. Boy, where do I start with this? This book has a lot of triggering content that there was no warning for. I did not know half the shit in this book was going to take place, and honestly I was so shocked and confused and uncomfortable reading it that I had to put it down for a bit because I was just so angered by this book. It just has a lot of triggering content that I don't think the younger side of young adult should read, and there's no trigger warnings on the first page. I've checked. There's no indication that it gets as, honestly, rapey as it does, and I just don't want like younger kids to look at this like I did and say, ooh, pretty cover, and buy it and then read that. So I'm really upset with how it was, first of all, labeled and presented to the world as a young adult book when it is so clearly not, and the fact that there are no trigger warnings for the content of the book. What I thought was going to be a female empowering book really was not, in my opinion, and there are a bunch of mixed reviews on it. A lot of people loved this book. I didn't, because I felt like the main character, she, yes, was rebelling in her own small way against the prince who rescued her, who was treating her like crap, but she really doesn't do anything until the end of the book, so we're spent watching her sort of be in this submissive position like the entire time. And yes, she's trying to find out answers about her past, but she's really not doing anything to change her circumstances. So I was really disappointed in that because I thought it was going to be more of a female empowering and a female doing book, but it was most of her just like, I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't good, and I wasn't expecting her to be as submissive as she was in this book. I was really expecting something a bit more fiery, and at the very end it does get fiery, and there's a huge plot twist that definitely shocked me that I really enjoyed actually, but it was sort of overshadowed by the rest of the book and me not liking like 3/4 of it. A lot of the times I had to actually reread pages to understand what was happening. Like, I'd read it once and simply not comprehend what was happening in the plot, so I'd have to read it again. So that's never a good sign, and overall this is just one of the worst books of the year for me. I gave this book 1 star because it was just so horrible in my opinion. Of course, this is my opinion. A lot of people really enjoyed it, but I just couldn't get past a lot of the bigger stuff. Finally, the most disappointing book of the year for me was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I gave this book 1 star. Part of me does think that my expectations were a little high for this book, so maybe part of me not liking it is on me because I read Sorcery of Thorns first, which is the most recent book that the author wrote. Both of them are standalone, so they have nothing to do with each other, but I read her second book first and her first book second. So after reading Sorcery of Thorns, like, Sorcery of Thorns was amazing, one of my favorite books of the year, and I think it's really funny that the same author has my least favorite and one of my most favorite spots on my list this year. So it's just interesting, but I really did not like this book, and yes, my expectations were high going into it because this book sort of involved everything that I love. It involved fae, forbidden romance, enemies to lovers, fae again. I love fae. So I had such high expectations for this book, and they were all met with sadness. The book started off really promising. The setting was beautiful. I loved hearing about how fae couldn't create works of art. They couldn't have these skills, so they relied on humans to make pastries for them and to do their art and create their clothing, and I thought that was really interesting that everyone sort of had to have a trade, and that our main character's trade was painting, and it was just so lovely, and the setting and the world building was gorgeous. And then we got into the actual plot, and that's where everything went wrong. When the Autumn Prince comes in for his portrait, him and Isabel sort of have this insta-lovey romance that we see nothing about. They first hate each other, and then over the course of 1 chapter they like basically fall in love with each other, and I was sort of like, what just happened? Like, I didn't even see them fall in love. It was so fast, like it didn't even happen on page. So that was extremely confusing, and as I've said before, I don't love the insta-love. I like seeing the characters work for it. The book just also went by so quickly. I mean, it is a tiny book. Like, there are not a lot of pages in here as opposed to Sorcery of Thorns, which was like a good 300 pages more than this. And I think if this book had been longer, she may have had more time to draw out the plot and think about it, but since it was so short, everything was rushed and we didn't get a lot of answers about things that were happening. And I understand that fantasies are really hard to do standalones for, because fantasies are drawn over time, and when you want to create these huge, magnificent, intricate worlds, you need a few books to do that. And I applaud her effort to try to do it in one book, because it succeeded in Sorcery of Thorns. That was a beautiful standalone, but it fell so short in Enchantment of Ravens. There were just so many things that were unanswered at the end of the book. Like, sort of the state of Rook and Isabel's relationship was unanswered, how they defeated the big bad. I didn't even see what happened. One page they were in dire straits and didn't look well, then the next page they were fine, and I was like, what happened that I'm not reading in these 2 pages? Like, what happened that let them win? I don't even know. There was just so much happening that I didn't understand, and that wasn't explained clearly by the author. I really wanted to enjoy this book, but I just simply couldn't get past those aspects of it. And the reason it's just like the lowest on my list is because I had such high hopes for it. After reading her second book, I was like, oh my god, her first book's gonna be even better, it's gonna be great, but it just wasn't, and therefore it gets my least favorite book spot of the year. Obviously, she corrected a lot of the things I think that I didn't like in her second book, so that let me know that she has improved. From this book to Sorcery of Thorns, she has obviously made tremendous strides as an author, because I loved her second book, and I will definitely read other books by her when they come out, but this first book just really was not it for me. And those were my worst books of 2019. So I had 7 that I really hated, which is actually pretty good considering I've read 100 books this year. So it's good that only 7 of them were like so bad that I had to put them on this list. Of course, there were other books I gave 2 stars to or 2.5 stars to, but these 7 were really the ones that I disliked so much that they're the first ones that popped to mind when I was thinking about books to do for this video. Do you agree with me? Have you read any of these books and have similar opinions? Do you not have similar opinions? What were your worst books of 2019? Put them down below. I would love to hear it. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Hit the notification bell to get updates on when I post. I post every single Monday and Thursday. So I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!